Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasts.
No one wants to grow up to be an addict, but yet so many people go down this path. But when you look at the big picture, everyone is just running from their own demons.
Find yourself in a constant battle for self-love and acceptance? If so, you're in the right place. This is True Crime Connections, and I'm Tiffanie, your host. With me this week, you may recognize from TV shows like 911, True Blood, Criminal Minds, Sean Hemeon, who can now also add author to the list. So hello, Sean, and welcome.
Thank you, Tiffanie. Happy to be here. Love talking about this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. So you wrote the book, The Good Little Drug Lord.
Yes.
I have to say, this seems so intriguing, but it might also be a tearjerker.
Well, that's a given. I mean, stories of redemption, that kind of it's, I would hope it is, but I have to say when I started writing the book, the title at the time was I Don't Want This to Be Sad. Because literally when I started writing it, I just went, I don't want this to be sad. And I was like, oh, wait, maybe that's the title. And that's what it was for a little while, because I just can't stand, I don't want to read the melodrama. I don't want to read, I'm not a fan of the memoirs that really what's the word? They make, it's like grief porn. It's like, it's masturbatory. It's about, which is also why this took 20 years, not to write, but for me to get to a place to share the story. Because my first 10 years, in recovery, this story was like my glory piece. It was like, look what I did. And it's not something to be proud of.
Right. But you have to look where you are now, you're also 20 years sober, which is amazing. You went back to college, you got your BA in creative writing. I mean, look at you, go on with your bad self.
And I actually am doing the acting thing, because 20 years ago it was just a thing, but now I'm actually doing the thing. So
Well, I think you've always been doing the thing. So
Yeah.
where does this story begin?
Oh boy. Well, I should first say the book isn't out yet, so hopefully I can come back and, hey, Tiffanie, it's coming out. Let's do a quick little thing and be like, hey, y'all love that podcast? Get ready for the real thing, But in the book, I'm just referring to the book just because I think it's a good starting place, which was when I came out at 19. Because the main rise and fall of this drug dealing narc story, it starts roughly around 19, but it peaks around 21, 22, 23. I got sober at 23. So just to give some context, I'm from Northern Virginia originally. So Washington, D.C. was my playground. So I started 19, and a little backstory with that was my, so I was raised Mormon, which is just another fun piece to this outrageous puzzle. And it's like, what's the most tragic case? Well, you make the Mormon kid gay. Let's just pile it on there. And I when I was in high school, I have there's 7 of us. And so I have 3 older brothers, and we're all very athletic. So just naturally, because they were jocks, sports legacy, they were automatically popular. So, when I came into high school, oh, you're a Hemeon, it automatically made me popular. And I was like, whatever. But the problem with that was I was realizing I was gay and I couldn't hide it. I mean, I had to desperately hide it. So I was trying to be a good Mormon boy, but like a cool jock dude. This is the 90s. So it's like the Mormons and the straight culture was like, you can't be gay. Not good at all. So needless to say, I wasn't the biggest fan of myself. And because of the Mormon upbringing, I definitely thought like God was punishing me to the point where as a 13-year-old, this is just wrong, but as a 13-year-old, I thought I wanted to die, which, which is the truth. But I always say like love saved me. I'm teasing, but it's true because my best friend who I met in 8th grade became my undercover boyfriend. And this is in the book. This is a whole. I go backwards in time because I try to understand how this adorable little Mormon boy could become this drug lord narc for the federal government dealing with Russian mafia. I'll get there. I'll get there. But I'm just setting it up the scene. So when I came out at 19, this best friend, we had a terrible breakup. He became my entire world because our relationship was secret. It was like Romeo and Romeo. Like we were hiding in the shadows. His home situation was so bad. He even lived at my home my junior year of high school, which is no teenager's equipped to even date, but let alone live with the person you're dating undercover. And other things happened that led to our breakup when I was 19. And because this person truly became my entire world, I had no other reason to like live. I mean, that's just how I felt. It was more that I felt so much pain and I didn't know what to do with it because I was not talking to anybody. And I discovered one weekend that cutting myself with a razor felt better than the pain I felt inside. That was one weekend. Then the next weekend after our really definite, definite breakup, him leaving me for somebody else, super melodramatic drama of a teen, I did attempt more harm that when my mother discovered me, it looked pretty clear that yeah, if somebody didn't discover me in a few hours, I could have left the planet. At that time, I was okay with that. So it starts at 19 with my outing, which was my mother finding me with bloody wrists. And I'm laughing because it's just ridiculous. It's absurd. And so I start with the therapist and who said if I got stitches, they would have to report me. And so we decided to do that. So, and then afterwards I go to PF Chang's with my mother and I come out to her and I'm like, and the first thing she says to me was, do you have AIDS? I was like, what? Do I have AIDS? And then she was concerned about having grandchildren. It was like, come on, mom. So now I'm going to fast forward a little bit just for the benefit of the time that we have and everything. But from 19 to like 21, I was experiencing being out. I was at theater school, so that helped in Richmond, Virginia at VCU. I started dating somebody else and he was an only child and his mother was very accepting of him. So watching him being out, it was, I even tried to live in New York near him, but 9/11 happened and it sent me back to, BCU. But all the while, I wasn't doing anything to deal with all that pain and that angst that I developed through the years. And so I was drinking more. I was drinking a lot more. I was experimenting with heavier drugs and heavier drugs. And then when that guy that I was dating and I broke up, my my whole system was like, oh my God, another breakup, we won't survive. Cause the previous one, I seriously tried to hurt myself. So I dove heavier into the club scene in DC, which just means heavier drugs. I abstained from doing crystal meth at that time, but ecstasy, maybe a little ketamine here, all the fun party drugs. Lots of cocaine, which truth be told, I hated because the second I would do it, I would want more. And I just hated that. I was like, why do people do this? You just do it and you want more. And I didn't understand it, but I still did it. So I'm struggling to stay, as long as I stay in school, theater school of all places, as I'm struggling, I'm staying in school. If I can stay in school, then it means I don't have a problem. I mean, I'm blacking out drinking. I'm missing Monday classes because I'm staying through the weekends. I meet, um, I meet a drug dealer who this is the gay scene of DC. And the party scene for gay boys is still to this day. They love circuit parties. Circuit party is like a weekend bender. I don't know who your fans are that listen to this, but circuit parties are like one-off huge dance parties in New York and they're Fort Lauderdale and all across the country and stuff. And so people go dance and do lots of drugs. I started dating this dealer and I was so it was thrilling to be brought into this drug dealing world, but I wasn't fully in it because I was the mob wife. I was, I was the kept boy. I was still on the outside because I just could watch him and the amount of drugs of usually in this world, this is like the party scene. So this is definitely like baseline methamphetamine. This is like, quarters, ounces, 8 balls. I hadn't seen pounds just yet. I'll get there, but and bags of ecstasy. I think they call it Molly now because I'm so old. They call it Molly now. But GHB, like these kinds of drugs, anything anybody really wanted, they could get. And then suddenly I have this feeling like, oh my God, my life before this was not the real life because now I'm in the underbelly of society and the world. Like this is how the world really works. Like, because some of his clients were like, this is DC, were like campaign managers, were like judges, were high powered lawyers. And like, wow, I was so like enthralled by that. One of them was a former pop star. I won't give that person's name, but I was just so, I was so like, this is what? This is how the world really works. Yes, this is it. And it was thrilling. And of course it was thrilling because it was new and I'm still safe on the outside. Um, but what had happened was I observed him dealing. And I began to fantasize and wonder like what that feels like. Cause my goodness, I was trying to be an actor and yes, I felt powerless in my life. So the fantasy of being a successful actor meant power, meant people loved me, meant I was enough, all those things. And then I turn and I watch how my drug dealer boyfriend is treated by everybody in the club I mean, like it's more than celebrity. It's like the Messiah arrived at the after hours. Like and then I hated when other dealers, if you needed to get drugs from them, they would do you'd have to do a whole song and dance and praise them. I couldn't stand that. That's why I dated him. So I could have an endless supply. But I was enthralled by just this power I saw, just this seduction, just this like, wow. And I want to know what that felt like. And as I was observing him, I realized like I don't know, as successful as he was at dealing, he was awful at it. Like he was so unreliable. He was so, he would make people do the song and dance crap. Like he just rode on the power that he had over people and stuff. And so as my addiction accelerated, because by this point, when he was out, the first time he was out of drugs and needed to re-up, we were coming down and it was an awful experience. And by this point, I'm starting to use on the weekends, like Friday into Monday, and then not like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but I'm a month away from using every day. And I'm barely hanging on in college. The theater school, the professors are starting to speak with me and threaten to kick me out and stuff. But one night he loved ketamine, it's a freaking horse cat tranquilizer. And, he would zonk out. And one night he did that and his phone was blowing up. I mean, blowing up. He forgot to he re-it up. He got more, but he didn't distribute it to like all of his clients. And so his phone was blowing up and, there's sex addicts that want their drugs for their orgy party. There's crazy tweakers in some random hotel that just want to tweak out. There's other friends. The list goes on. And I picked up the phone and I answered because I recognized one of the numbers was like his main client, like the guy that actually had like millions of dollars. And he asked me to come deliver, drugs to them. And so I'm looking, I know my dealer boyfriend's going to be pissed off. He's going to think I'm trying to steal everything. But I was like, oh, and then he offered to give me money to come deliver it. I was like, okay, actually I'm doing a good thing. I'm saving his business. So I deliver it to that guy and I'm like, sweet. Yeah. It felt like he pulled out the red carpet for me. I got all the attention and it was, he was having a couple of men over who were definitely not dressed when I got there. But that's, I don't know your listeners, so I'm keeping this sort of like PG-13/R, but I won't dive too much into, I'll just get to the good stuff. It's not great stuff, but anyway, the phone kept going off and I was so proud of myself that I delivered the whole rest of the night to like many other clients. And I was like, this is amazing. And I came back. I must have made him only like couple $1,000s, but I'm 20 and like holding thousands of dollars in my hand felt like hundreds of thousands in my hand now. And so I was so proud of myself that I came back. Oh, I should state that part of the glamour with the drug dealer boyfriend was he lived in hotels and he would get two rooms, one on a lower floor where he would just keep the drugs, period, in the safe, and then one on the other floor where he would hang out and sleep and that kind of stuff. And so I lived with, I would always be with him in hotels and suites for months. And this was how he operated. So I came back to the hotel. He was awake. He was pissed. He was throwing shit at me. He was like freaking out. He was like, I knew you wanted to steal my business and like threaten me, all these things, to the point where I was so high and resentful at that point that I said, oh, you think I'm trying to steal your business? Okay, fine. Watch me. So I stupidly, I was just, it was almost like a climax too of all my life up to that point of people telling me what I can and can't do. And it just peaked in that moment of like, I can do this. And I knew too, I was good at it. I was charming. I was reliable. I knew I could do this better than him. And I was determined to not be like the other dealers. This is stupid, I know, but this is like the Mormon part of me coming out. Like, I'm just going to be a good boy. I'm going to be a good Mormon dealer. Like, I'm going to be noble and not lie to people and be responsible. So I enlisted some friends, some addict friends to help me. I got a guy to front me some drugs. Then I went to the club and I started selling it. And I was like, see, I can do this. This is easy. But after like 2 weeks of doing that, he had like control of a lot of the clubs. When I say that, he just had, ins with security and stuff. So one of the nights he sent the security after me and they took all my drugs and my profit and kicked me out and banned me from the club. And I was like, ugh, just upset, pissed off. And I was like, this means I should take this as a sign, go back to school, don't do this. But it just pissed me off more. And then I was like, okay, all right, you know what? I'm going to start a business in Richmond where I was at school. So I can prove that I'm still like, I can prove I'm still good because I'm going to go back to school and I don't have a problem. And so I went back down to Richmond for like a month or two to finish out the semester and I started dealing down there. There was nobody who had meth. So I was like a kingpin right away. It was like the biggest deal that I had all this stuff. And so I built my little tiny mini empire down there. And then I brought it back up to DC to start. My goal was to steal his clients. Cause then I was like, I can steal his clients and then prove I'm better than him. And like, fuck you, goodbye. I'm going to move on with my life and go back to being an actor who's trying to be famous.
You already broke like the number one rule. You don't get
Which
high on
is-
your own supply.
Oh, no, that's impossible. I mean, by this point, I'm using every day. Like, I mean, by the end of the semester of school, like I am high. I forgot already what it's like to be sober, right? So school didn't work out because I effed up my finals because I fell asleep at the wheel and crashed my car and I couldn't get down to my finals. I'm going to jump a few stories and leave them in the book because that's a thrilling thing that happened. Anyway, I was very successful. I keep doing this, successful at stealing some of his clients, and it just pissed him off so much more. And I felt satisfied. I felt like, okay, I can leave this world. I experienced it. I'm going to get out. This is good. My resentment is over. Like, F him. I proved him wrong. And maybe I'll just go back to doing this on the weekends. And, it's a little scary that I don't know what it's like to be sober. Okay. This is okay. All right, cool. I'm going to go to community college because I was kicked out of the VCU one and not kicked out. Failed out and I'm going to get back on my path. This is good. I'm going to do this. And on the weekend where I'm like settling all of that in DC, I have one more face off with the dealer. Like, you're nothing. I proved you wrong. Oh, no. Oh, sorry. You know what happened? You see what had happened was there's this guy that was out there. He was this big, like he was Sicilian, but he was like black Sicilian. So he was like dark skinned, but he was big guy. And if you saw him on the street, you'd be like, that dude is like a hitman for some mob thing and the straightest guy ever. He was very gay, but he was very straight acting, but he was very intimidating and he would do anything for meth. And so it was known that he would like go pick fights because somebody gave him meth and said, go fight that person or dangerous stuff like that. So we're in the club and I'm sort of celebrating my win of, stealing his clients and doing well. And I feel this fist just across my face and I look and it's that guy. And I'm just like, what's happening? And then he comes at me, tries to tackle me, but somehow I squeeze his head between my legs and I just start start hitting because I don't know what to do. So I'm hitting the back of his head. And it feels like I'm doing this for 10 minutes. And it's probably was 10 seconds. And I look up. I'm like, will somebody help this guy? Get him off me. And I knew the owner of the club at that point pretty well. So he came into the rescue and sent this guy away. But I was pissed because I knew the dealer boyfriend sent this guy after me. So I was like, I'm going to go tell him what's up. And I did, tell him I beat him at his own game. I'm better than him, and resentment. I hate the world. I hate you. Dar, 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 goodbye. And so I was like satisfied. I got back in my car. It was the middle of winter. And I was like, I did it. Yes. And my car is on, the heater's going, and I fall asleep. And then I wake up, however many hours later, it's still dark. Tap, tap, tap. And I look up and it's a police officer. And I didn't know that my license was suspended due to that falling asleep at the wheel, running away from the scene with my car that I totaled under the back of a Mack truck. So they had every right to search me and every right to put me in handcuffs after they found the plethora of drugs and money and other drugs and paraphernalia and scales and baggies and they found everything. This was February 28th, 2003. And I was carted in front of a judge. I had to stay in prison. So the jails in DC were giant cells, like, I don't know, a 20 by 20-foot room. And DC is at that time too, there's a lot of racism in the judicial system. So like I was put into the cell, one of 3 white guys in a room of 50, it was just, they called me white bread. Oh, hey, white bread. And that's when and so I was carted in front of a judge after spending the weekend there. And, there's so much to the story, but I was released. And a few days later, investigators reached out to me and wanted to work some kind of plea deal if I became some kind of informant. And I was like, I watched all the movies. What do you mean? And what? No, like nobody, you don't rat. You don't do that. What do you mean rat? So I go to the meeting at least go to the meeting. And I made it seem like the stuff that they caught me with, or at least this is what I told myself, that I was holding for somebody else. But it was enough where they were like,
That
oh, I know. I mean, it
line.
was like, that was my friend. I was just holding. That's what I told my parents and my very naive Mormon mother. My dad, by the way, was not Mormon. So he just kept rolling his eyes at me. My dad was like streetwise, my mother was like, well, you should talk to that friend. Tell him to talk to the police. I'm like, she's like, no, that's just not how this works. It's just not how this works. But so in the meeting, in the debriefing, which was like in this boardroom in like those giant, marble interior. If you've been to DC, every building is just like these cement blocks and stuff, and giant seal of the United States right behind me. Because everything in DC, it's federal ground, period. So you're arrested, it's automatically federal. And they, in so many words, I said, I'm nobody. I can't get you information when they wanted me to sign the informant deal. But they said in so many words that they're not idiots. They know I'm dealing, but they want me to keep dealing because they want me to get the information from somebody higher that they would help build a case around or something like that. That's how I became kind of this informant to them. So then I was released. And word traveled fast that I was arrested. So nobody in DC would deal with me or talk with me. And so I was like, fuck. I have to keep dealing to get information to give to the investigators so I don't go to prison. But nobody in DC will deal with me. So what the fuck do I do? Of course, my drug dealer ex-boyfriend was very accommodating and like, oh, come here. Because, whispers were that he called the cops on me when I was in the car. So we don't know that answer yet. But he was definitely he was madly in love with me. So like I was suffering. So of course he was like, oh, come here, I'll take care of you. And I was happy to take his drugs. And to him, he won, and that, he got what he wanted. I was arrested. I'm out of the game. But I'm not out of the game. In fact, I'm deeper in the game. In fact, I have to go deeper in the game. In fact, I have to get bigger. Like I have to, like nobody in DC would deal with me, but how do I get information from somebody in DC to give to these investigators? What the fuck do I do? What the fuck do I do? And then I figure out that I can go to these circuit parties that I described earlier. And there's always like always people using who can connect you to a dealer, and then the dealer can connect you to potentially to a supplier. Supplier would be like one or two people away from basically the cartels, because those were the ones that were really bringing the meth in. So I started going traveling. I started traveling, getting meth out of DC. I'd go to Fort Lauderdale, I'd go to New Orleans, I'd go to Atlanta. And now I had a ticking clock. I had this that was the end of February. And then my sentencing hearing was going to be like, I think it was June. So I had those months to just sort of compile some kind of information. But I couldn't get access to the information if I didn't have access to the drugs to get access to those people. So I was like forced to deal more.
Did
And there
they
was
give you your
because
drugs?
no, definitely not. But total side note here, after I got sober and after I got my impounded car back, when this is crazy, maybe this will be in the other book, but when I opened my car door at the impound lot, picking up my car a month into sobriety, I look there on the floor of the front seat is a bunch of baggies of crystal meth. I was like, what the fuck? What is going on? And then in the trunk, I had about a gallon of what's called GHB, and it was in a giant water bottle. It's clear liquid. So at that time, I don't think they fully knew what it was. I don't know if your listeners know, but GHB is like a party drug. It makes you feel like you're drunk, and the gay boys love it. Unfortunately, a lot of people use it as a date rape drug. It's not because you mix it with alcohol, it makes you kind of actually, there's something coming to that. All right, all right. So, so I am traveling, and because of the time frame, like I can't drive it back, or I could, but it would take too long. So I risk trying to go through airport security with like tucked into my pants. And at that time, this is right after 9/11. So I'm just stupid looking white college frat boy. They didn't give a shit about me. But I was stupid. I would buy day of one-way tickets, which is automatically gets you in the extra security pat down line. But I was put in that line with 20 other Middle Eastern men because that's who they were looking after, after the fear of 9/11 again. Um, so I would make my way through these security lines really messed up because it was so, I mean, nerve wracking to be able to do that, to do this. And I would bring it back to DC in hopes that the city was dry, meaning there wasn't a lot of product to get. And then I'd be the hero and people would have to buy from me. And then I'd be brought back into the fold. And that's what started to happen. And then ultimately I found a supplier in Atlanta and we had a good run, great stuff. I think his supplier got it from the cartels, which was, I was one person away from like he brought me on a pickup one time and supposedly it was a whole thing going down, but that's uh, you hear things doesn't matter. But we had a good thing going, great math, like, and I would bring back, I'd have an ounce, which is a good amount, like tucked in this. I had underwear that had like a bottom part to it that would just tuck right up there. And I started not basically, I was trafficking through the airports. Again, I would play the role of stupid white frat boy. Twice, twice I didn't clean out my bag well enough and they found like a baggie of a white powder substance. I cleaned stuff out, but they found it twice. First time was with this older white man, which is relevant because he could see himself in me because I'm 21, 22, and I put on this whole act like, "Oh my God, my friends and I were partying and I didn't, I left it in there." And he fell for it and he was like, "Hey," I was like, "Oh my God, my parents are going to kill me." He's like, "Hey, we've all been there." And he threw it away and ushered me forward. The other guy was visibly gay. And I say that because he was like totally checking me out before I even made it to the security line. And when he had to, my bag was flagged and he had to search it. He was like, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And we just have to look through it real quick." And he looked through it. He didn't really want to. He was so embarrassed and kind of shy that I'm just looking at him, staring him down, like trying to be seductive, move this process along. And then last moment, he found a baggie. And I shit you not. I don't know what happened, but I looked at him. I looked at the baggie. I reached out. I grabbed the baggie. I turned around. I threw it in the trash can. I turned around. I just looked at him and continued with my seductive eyes, and we just both pretended like that never happened. And when I just moved on. Anyway, I know. So I'm laughing, but that's just, it's just crazy. So I'm working with this guy. He's becoming a good friend, and I'm moving up the ranks well past my ex-boyfriend dealer at this point. Like, I'm moving way more drugs than he ever did. People are trusting me. What I wanted to get to were the actual suppliers that came into DC, because then I could give the investigators information who were harassing me. And for whatever reason, they were in my phone as I didn't know what else to label them as. So there's two of them. I labeled one as yes and one as no. And I think it was a manifestation of the battle of like, yes, you should inform. No, you shouldn't. Like, yes, you should do this. No, you're not a rat. You're not. And one time I fed them information that was made up because they kept harassing me. I mean, they were texting me. They were like, we know you're traveling. We know you're doing this. I don't know how they were finding this out. So I gave them, and I was like, somebody's doing something here. Like, I remember doing that, but I was still so torn because I was making friends with these folks and I didn't want to turn them in. And by the way, when I was being debriefed, they tried to get information. They read me a bunch of names of people, and they read me like a list of 15 to 20 names. And within the 15 to 20 names was combinations of names of every freaking person I knew at that point. So I'm in my
Oh
head, I'm
my
like,
God.
how many people have been arrested? Like, but they were mismatching the first and the last name and this kind of stuff. But they said my ex's name, they said this other guy's name, they said this other guy's name, they said like, I was just like, I tried to hold it in. I was like, is everybody a fucking informant? Like, is that how this works? Like, what is happening? Um, anyway, so this is the reason I even wrote the book is for this. I'm going to keep it a short story, but it's this part that I'm about to share because this is the everything. I go backwards in time as well in the story because I needed to understand where I came from to to make sense of why what I'm about to share, why I made this decision. I mean, you could argue, was I really making decisions as drugged as I was? But the reason my book is meant to be a message in a bottle, it's meant to be an amends. And that is because when I was at Atlanta doing my routine, coming down, hanging out with my friend for the night, flying back the next day, that night I met one of his friends and he came over and partied. I mean, this guy was stunning. This guy was gorgeous. This guy was like, you're on an Abercrombie bag. You are, and you're into me? Oh my goodness. And I don't know how to function around that. So here's a bunch of drugs. Just take them all. Like, oh, you're into me. You're into me. And my friend was doing some other runs, and so the guy and I were alone, and we got very friendly, and he was sharing a story about how his ex-boyfriend slash boyfriend was in the hospital, potentially dying, but his family was incredibly religious and would not let him go see him, so he was feeling very sad, a lot of feelings, and I gave him some GHB. I gave him a lot, and then he said, "I'll be right back." He left. I said, "Take my number, call me when you come back." He never did call me, but he came back and he was stumbling. And I was like, "Ugh, when you do too much GHB, you do something called falling out. It's you pass out essentially. And you really got to be careful of that and people's breathing and stuff." And so he made it back, but he passed out and he was acting like real more so. And I was like, "Oh, this is worrisome." My friend wanted to go to the club. So I was like, okay, we'll just put this guy in the back seat on his side. I tried to feed him more meth. I was like just jamming it up his nose to kind of jumpstart the engine. And anyway, I'm gonna fast forward. This is all in the book, but I'm gonna fast forward to the point because you can see where this is going. Where hours later, we're at like the third different club, and I'm remembering he's in the car and I'm like, I'm going to go check on him. And I go out to the car to check on him. He's lying down in the back seat. I get in the front. I look back and it just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't, it's not right. You can feel the breathing is low. You can feel these things. And I go back inside and, my other friend, I'm like, you got to come out and see this. Like, I think might be losing my mind, but like, something's not right here. Something's not right. He's like, stop it. You're fine. Go back to doing. And so I went to the corner. It did, a bunch more drugs. And then I came to like a half an hour later and I was like, oh no, oh my God. you know, I should go check on him. But this is the decision part, because my brain would not allow me to believe that this person was actually dying. My brain was not going to that place because I was paranoid of being caught. I was paranoid of the police showing up. I was paranoid of many things. And I still believed all the consequences wouldn't happen to me. This is after I totaled my car, failed out of college, was arrested, now an informant. Like, death was something that, I don't know, it was still the consequence that just didn't seem near by or anything. And so uh, I my biggest regret is not acting sooner. But eventually I got myself to like, no, you have to go face whatever, you got to go out to the car. So this time when I went out, I get in the front seat, I turn around and I fly back against the front console because he's staring at me. His eyes are wide open. His face is blue. His hands are blue. There's a pee stain. There's some snot frozen here, and he's staring at me. Um, but from that stare, I know there's no life in that body. And just to make sure, I reach back and I pick him up, and the feel of his body, the weight of it, is an experience I've never had before. And from that experience, it confirmed, and I freaked out and I let him go. And then if I just to really drive it home that this person is no longer alive, the way his body just fell back down and flopped on the door and hit it, and just the noise and everything was like, oh, fuck. And so I ran inside. I'm hysterical. I'm telling this friend of mine to come out. He's screaming at me to calm down. I'm like, get out the car. You gotta come see your friend. Da, da, da." He's joking. He thinks I did too many drugs and he just can't wait to get back inside. And then he gets in the front seat, looks back, and then just starts screaming. Just starts screaming. And I'm like, okay, that really confirms it. I was hoping my friend was gonna help the situation. Then I realized I gotta do something. So I smack him because literally he wouldn't shut up. And I was like, we gotta do something. And so I start calling the ambulance, and then I freak out. We can't have the police here. Um, I asked the ambulance, where's the nearest hospital? Fortunately, it was like a mile away. I smack the friend again. I say, start driving. He takes off down a one-way street, but this is like 5:30 a.m., 6 a.m. We get to the hospital and we do the classic drop the body off at the ER and drive away. And I immediately go to the airport. I immediately am paranoid that somehow the police are after me or something like that. Um, and I get back to LA. That's where I live now. I get back to DC and I'm like, I can't travel anymore. That's no more. I got to figure out a new solution. I got to figure out a new path forward. The investigators are harassing me. And 2 weeks later, as I'm in this pit of what am I doing? What am I doing? My phone number was the last number he called. Therefore, it was the first number his mother called because if I was the last number on the phone bill. And I'm super high. I'm doing whatever, and she calls in the middle of whatever, and um, she had this deep, deep like Alabama like, please don't hang up, and I'm just like, what? And she was just begging me, please, I just want to know what happened to my baby boy. It took me a second, then I realized what she was talking about, and she just was begging me not to hang up. She was begging me to tell her what happened. And all I could think about was like, okay, the police. I was thinking, okay, the police are trying to get me to confess. It's outrageous, but that's what I was paranoid. Um, and she's begging me, and I'm frozen. And finally, I said, I don't know what you're talking about, lady. And I hung up on her. So the reason my book is the message in the bottle is because a year later, after I got sober, I tried. I tried at that time looking at my phone bill to retrace it. I tried looking at the hospitals we may have dropped him at. I tried for that whole first year. And then recently, as the book started to emerge more and more, um, I did more research into trying to find what hospital that was in Atlanta. I was trying to find everything I could, following leads, looking at obituaries, but something tells me the obituary is probably not Atlanta. It's probably some other place. I have no way of contacting that friend, that dealer friend from down there. So the book is for her. The book is for this mother. I have many readers, but I have a reader of one. Excuse me. And all mothers, this is what happens. This is what could happen to your son. So if she reads it one day, so be it. But this is part of my amends. And that call, I mean, I remember standing up and I smashed the glass bong. I screamed for everybody to get out of there. I threw everything off the tables. I mean, I was a mess. I mean, I was alone. I was the investigators, the prison, like my parents were not helping because I still thought they didn't love me because I was like nothing. It was, I don't know how to describe just that level of loneliness. It was like being at the bottom of the ocean. Um, the deepest parts of the ocean, the pressure of that, just the blackness, the darkness of that. And I didn't know what to do. And so one of my runners, he cut hair. So he would deliver drugs while also cutting your hair. And that was his business. And he would run. And one of his clients that he cut hair for was this girl who was dating the supposed Russian mafia um, guy who had access to, you know, uh, pink meth from Hawaii, but it doesn't matter. What matters is it was the best meth I've ever had in my life. And I said, no, that's insane. Why would I deal with the mafia? That's stupid. But after this moment and nowhere else to turn to and the prison date looming, I agreed. I agreed to meet this person. The funny part was he was very attractive. And I don't know if I was sexualizing the violence. I mean, the guy, if I didn't deliver, the guy was pinning me against the wall. Like, I mean, he was scary. He put this really ornate, stupid cliche pearl inlaid gun in my face. Like he was very in I just agreed to do it because I wasn't gonna do it. Then I agreed to meet him. And then when I met him and then when I tried the meth, then my head blew off because the meth was the greatest thing I ever felt. And it evaporated, you know, the despair I was feeling around the mother, around my family. It took care of everything. So I was like, yeah, I'll work with you. But in my mind, I'm like, I'm just going to do this. I'm just, so I impressed him because I sold a couple ounces in a few days, which is a lot, if you're like a dealer or supplier. And so he had pounds and I was starting to move bigger amounts pretty quickly, getting him his money and then it slowly started to emerge. Well, if maybe I'll have no jail time if I'm informing on mafia tied people. Like if they get this guy, then they can flip him to something higher. And I was in my mind now, and even now is saying this out loud. It's like that's like that have so many things happen where it's like, this is like a freaking movie. Like this doesn't happen. How am I thinking about trying to flip a like the what? So I was contemplating that, and this meth was so good. But what happened? See, what happened was I just was incapacitated with the high, meaning no, that's not true. I was incapacitated with the buildup of my emotional torment that the high needed to increase. And so I was smoking the meth by that point. And by that point, I was smoking at least an 8 ball a day, which at that time was like $450 a day, which is nothing. Well, that's of course that's a lot. That's
A lot.
so I started doing more of the product than selling it. And so I eventually started owing him money. And he got more violent, he got more threatening. And everything peaked in this moment. I'll never forget this moment. It's like, you know, um, 4 a.m. and somehow the investigators found me like in the middle of DC at the only 24-hour CVS. And they found me in the street and pinned me and were screaming. And it was like a few weeks from my sentencing. And like, kid, you're going to prison. Do you know what happens when the classic kind of like, what happens when you go to prison? And so the investigators are after me. The mafia guy is threatening my life. And I'm just like wanting to just find a way to get more drugs to do them because I don't know what else to do. I could turn in the mafia guy, but I started liking him at that point because he was genuinely like a pretty good guy. And I was like, but then if I turn him in, is the mafia really there? Are they really involved? Are they gonna go after my family? All these things are going through my head. And I got to this place where just the illusion that I was somehow still in control of my addiction, which is insane, shattered. And I was like, I can't stop using, and this is my life, and I hate it. And I thought that by choosing to go to prison was a noble thing because one, I couldn't stop using. Two, I was terrified of the mafia guy. This might protect me and my family. But three, I felt I deserved it. I couldn't shake the mother. I couldn't shake what I did. I thought I was a good person. I thought I was a good person. I guess I'm not. I guess it's true. The Mormon God, what the Mormon God thinks of me, which is I'm a piece of shit who deserved to be get, like I was still holding on to that. So it's like, this is my life. This is what I deserve. So I accepted my fate and went to my sentencing. And I had a court appointed lawyer this whole time, heart of gold guy, beautiful human being. He gets up there with me and, the judge is, you can tell he can't wait to nail me to the wall with the 10 plus years. He's salivating at the mouth. But the young federal prosecutor stands up and he's like, Your Honor, we're asking for this case to be dismissed. And my court appointed lawyer, Dennis Braddock, next to me, like, don't, whispering, he's like, don't say anything, don't move, don't say anything. And the judge is even confused. He's like, Are you sure? Like, are you sure? No, he's more pissed. But prosecutor was like, Yeah. And boom, case dismissed. I'm dumbfounded. I'm like, what is happening? What is going on? The lawyer pulls me into a side room and he's like, I've tried hundreds, thousands. I've I don't he was dumbstruck. He was like, I've never seen that. What did you do? What did you do? And I was like, I dealt drugs to judges, to the campaign managers, to high powered lawyers. And along the way, people sometimes were like saying they could pull connections, but that's utter bullshit. So I said, I don't know. Some people said they could do it. And that's not what happened. I don't believe that's what happened at all. I said that. And then I was like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And he just looked at me shaking his head. He's like, you better not be back here, kind of giving me this second chance guardian angel speech and sent me on my way. And then I remember the first call I made was to my mother. I was thinking of her and she just was sobbing. I didn't talk about them much through this, but they were around as much as I would let them or as much as they could handle, but she was just sobbing. Anyway, I'll circle back to my thoughts about why that case was dismissed. But just to wrap that up, I lasted 6 more weeks out there. I really needed to make sure I was an addict. And on my 23rd birthday, September 26th, my running mate, this girl who I was running with, the whole running mate meaning she was running drugs for me. She was like my confidant. 2 weeks before my birthday, she was like, I want to get sober. I want to go to rehab. And I remember looking at her and I shit you not, I looked at her and I said, you can do that? Because I thought rehab was for train spotting. I thought it was like I needed to be shooting heroin in an abandoned house. I was in an abandoned house at that time that friends let go of because it would flood out when it would rain. So it was abandoned and I'm living on an air mattress that would flood out when it would rain, doing drugs. And I just didn't put it together. So I was like, oh, I saw a way out. I was like, okay, maybe I'll do that too. So my 23rd birthday, we were going to have a going away party and I was going to go get sober. But the morning of, when I realized truly that I could not stop, when I said, this is the day I stop, then everything shattered and broke apart. And then a window opened up and she and I jumped through this window and we're like, we need to go. We need to jump. We need to call for people. We need to call for help. And she called her parents and they lived in Boston. And a half an hour later, they were in the car doing an 8 or 9 hour trip down to get her. And I called my ex dealer boyfriend. I was like, come take all these drugs, get it out of here. Let's go. And then I called my parents and I could never, ever forget because all I said, my mother answered the phone. It was Sunday morning. She's getting ready for church. And all I said was, Mom. That's all I had to say. And she just said, where are you? Because she's been waiting for that call. I give her the address and, they're there 20 minutes later. And then I realize, oh, shit. my case might be over, but there is still a very angry, potentially violent mafia, really good looking dude after me. What the F do I do? So in the book, I chose to have him show up and be there in my presence just because it was easier to write it. But the dialogue was exactly the same, which is I called him and he had repeatedly called me. I mean, on blast, on blast. And I finally picked up, or I mean, I called him and he finally was just screaming, 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 where's my money? And then I didn't know what else to do. So I was honest. I was like, I'm getting help. I'm going to rehab. And there was a pause. And this is going to sound like I made this up. And I definitely did not make this up. He then said, "You can do that?" I shit you not. And I'm trying not to laugh. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, you can. And I'm going to get a job. And so I was wondering if I could do a payment plan. And so I was like, I'm laughing now because it's absurd, but it's what I had at that time. And there was this long pause. I almost wanted to be like, hello? And there's a long pause. And he goes, you can hear him. He's rather wistful. And he's like, you know, I've always wanted to sell real estate in Baltimore. And I'm trying to hold it together. And I'm like, yeah, you can do that. You can do that, man. And then there's another long pause. And he goes, mind you, I had owed him thousands at this point. And he goes, you know, just forget about the money, man. Best of luck. Then he hangs up.
No shit.
My parents show up. I drive away. And I start rehab like 2 weeks later. I slept for 2 weeks and then I start rehab. It's so hard to tell that story and not want to go off on all these branches because there's other parts to this story that, you know, obviously for sake of time that I just couldn't get into, but it's all in the book. I'm not trying to sell the book, but it's all in the book. So, I just a detour. So, what's really fascinating writing this book. Yes, I was very incredibly profoundly lucky in writing the book. You could easily say that was probably white privilege. That was probably white privilege, which I got lucky because of. However, it's part of my story. And so my running theory with the dismissal of the case, and I'd love to talk to a federal prosecutor and just see what their thoughts are, because my thought is, their workload must be monumental. The amount of paperwork, the amount of I mean, who knows? And so I'm thinking they were lightening the load. I'm thinking they got nothing on this kid and maybe he has a hopeful future. I hate to say this, but he's white. I don't know, um, let's lighten the load. Okay. We'll just dismiss this case. There's nothing there. And I don't know what the investigators said because I didn't give them anything. I didn't give them anything.
Yeah, because you were caught with all that. Like, what do you mean we got nothing on this kid? You had a lot of bags. That's what you
I
had.
No, I possession with intent to distribute. No, but there was so many odd things. Like I told you, like after I got sober, picking up my car, my impounded car, there was crystal meth, baggies with crystal meth, like on the floor of my car. And I'm like, what is going on here? Is it this disorganized? Is that what it is? Or like, this is so strange. This is so strange. I'm just one lucky SOB that is granted this second pass so I can share this story one day because otherwise I would not be sharing this story if it weren't for the mother who may not even be alive, but it's for all those mothers that really, my mother plays a central part in obviously my life, but in the book as well, this journey that she and I go on, because not to give away the happy ending, but to give away the happy ending, you know, going backwards in time, you see how rough it was with her, my Mormon mother. But lo and behold, the last chapter is getting married in 2023 to my now husband. And she walked me down the aisle. She walked me down the very gay wedding aisle. proud, genuinely, not like I'm going to do this and be uncomfortable, but like proud. So she went on her own journey as well. It's just from where we were and from where we are now, it's astounding. Yeah.
It's a
That's my
blessing.
story.
Well, holy fuck.
I don't know what you expected. I mean, I'm sure there was a lot that I covered. Was there anything to clarify? Any questions? I don't know.
It's just so crazy, just how everything worked out. Like, usually that shit does not happen. And how come all you people don't know that you can go to rehab? That's all of you. That's
Oh,
a thing.
okay, good. That truly, I mean, because you watch in the '90s, you watched Requiem for a Dream or like Train Spotting. Like you watched, if you watched an addict movie, it was only about heroin addicts and how their life went to shit. Basketball Diaries, like the awful come downs from that, and like heroin addicts went to rehab. But no, when I actually did go to rehab, I was with half of them were soccer moms who couldn't stop drinking Chardonnay. One of them was a cokehead. One of them was like, it was like, oh my God, everybody goes to rehab. Like I really didn't know. I really had no idea. Let alone I was in the disillusionment that like, wait, I'm a narc for the federal government dealing massive amounts of meth, and I don't think I should go to rehab. What? You know,
Well, I mean, obviously your mind is not where it should be, especially when you're getting high all the time. You're somewhere else. You're checked out. So, I mean, it's almost like you had a handicap for a little while. Cause you don't think clearly.
I mean, that's true. I still feel responsible for the young man. The thing I was gonna say was I lost contact with that guy in Atlanta. However, the last conversation we had, he informed me that he thinks that young man, when he left, went and drank alcohol, and he might have drank it intentionally, knowing that the effects of alcohol and GHB are lethal. I'm not saying he had a death wish, but he was in a place where he would have made that kind of mistake because the way we witnessed him was a little bit more than a fallout from GHB. So we think he mixed things, and that is not forgiving, my actions, but it's also part of that mix. Like you're saying, like I was handicapped, as you're saying, he handicapped himself further. But it still doesn't take away from the fact that, wait, I thought I was a good person. Am I still a good person? How did this happen? Where, what, what, you know?
Right. I mean, the first time when you saw him kind of like that, should have taken him to the hospital. He might have lived. But, you wanted to get your friend, he derailed you. It's like this whole thing. So I mean, the coulda, woulda, shouldas, you don't know. You can't play that game.
Correct.
You can't do that to yourselves.
No.
Um, but it's just tragic, and that stuff happens all the time. So it's
Yeah.
important for people to know and to take care of your friends. Make sure, if you guys all went there together, you leave together and all that. So it's just drug etiquette. It's
No,
it's
no,
not
I
so
mean,
petty.
no, no, they're for sure what okay, so drug etiquette to me at that time was you definitely took care of each other, especially people who took too much GHB. Like you definitely knew the protocols in order to help that person because you knew you could edge towards, their system slowing down enough where they stop breathing. So we looked out for each other that way. If you did too much ketamine, you'd give them more methamphetamine. Like, you knew how to mix the right alchemical mix of stuff. And the thing that surprised me too was there between the dealers and the suppliers, there was this etiquette. We were definitely, clearly, obviously the true addicts of the bunch. And so we when one of us was out, we would always give the other just some free product because we know the pain of coming down. Because again, at that point, I hadn't drawn a sober breath in well over a year and a half. So I thought that was supportive. My competition, oh, you don't have any drugs, like, but deep down, you understand the pain of that come down. So I'd be like, "All right, let me just give this to you," and they would do the same back. And so there was some etiquette in between trying to stop each other's business.
Yeah,
But we knew,
well,
but again, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, I do like coming off that stuff. It's horrible, absolutely horrible. So when
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know that it's painful, and my God, you feel like you're gonna die. Like you're gonna do anything that you can do not to feel that.
correct, correct, correct. And yeah, there's empathy, empathy between the drug dealers. Well, that was one thing I did. I mean, I noticed. I mean, it's obvious to me now being on the outside, but in being in it, I started realizing everybody that I dealt with, at least the addicts, the ones that were I dealt with mostly, were running from something. They had some tragic thing. They had some horrific thing. They had some fill in the blank. I mean, they were, and again, obviously now on this side, having this knowledge and mindset that you and I both have had through the years and stuff. But up until that point, the age that I was, not understanding much about how the world works, I was still able to clock, wow, we all came from really fucked up things. Wow. Like I was reacting to that. I was also reacting to, you could see in the addicts, you could see who had dead eyes and who had the light in their eyes. Meaning, if you use long enough, there's just this sheen that comes over your eyes, and it doesn't have the life, it doesn't have the twinkle. I noticed that, and I could tell addicts from like people who were just coming into the game. And I started losing my twinkle towards the end, thankfully. I mean, I was in and out for a year and a half. I was dealing with people that were in this for like 5 years. I mean, they were full blown addicts for 5 years. I mean, just
Walking Dead.
crazy, crazy insane, crazy insane. I got out in enough time where there's not a lot of physical damage. My gums still are, 20 years later, still not right fully. I have scars in the back of my leg from, not sleeping for 3 or 4 days. Your immune system takes a hit. So a lot of tweakers get cysts that can grow to the size of like golf balls, softballs. And so most have scars from those. But that was, and my nervous system is still, I swear, recalibrating 20 years later. Of course it is.
Oh, your body will forever be healing from all of that. I mean, trust
Yeah.
me, I had my days. I didn't go down your rabbit hole, but it's on my own. So like we all do, but you're right. Most of the time it's because we're running from something, we're hiding from something.
Yeah.
Childhood trauma affects us forever. And that's the whole reason even behind my podcast. Like it's time we realize that. And it's okay that we fuck up. We're humans. But as long as you learn to pick yourself back up again, put yourself on track, then you're okay. I believe that.
Yeah. I mean, and if you can't even do that, it was asking for help. That changed everything because I realized I couldn't pick myself back up. So reaching out, asking for somebody to help me was the big decision, was like, clearly my way of doing my life clearly is not the best way. And I completely failed at this. I need a new way. Somebody help me. Uh, I
That's the
didn't know
first
how to.
step.
That is the first step.
Is
You you know that is the first step. That's exactly right. I mean, you don't know you're doing the first step when you're doing the first step until you learn what the first step actually is. And you're like, that was the first step. That was the. Well, actually, to that point though, I will say this. I will say that morning of the 23rd, of the 26th, when I was turning 23, when I was like, this is the day that I'm going to stop using. When I was alone after sending people away, and in my head, I know like, okay, I'm supposed to like walk away from this. I reached for the pipe and I kept smoking. And there was this disassociation of like watching myself, my body moving in this way to do this thing. And I was telling it to stop, but it wouldn't stop. And so it just kept going and it kept going. And it was a weird, more than weird, it was a terrifying sensation because there was no connection between here and here. And I suddenly like saw what I had been experiencing this whole time was I was a slave to this drug. And talking about helping yourself, when that it was like the glass ceiling shattered of a disillusionment shattered. I mean, shattered to the point where it almost took the wind out of me. This realization that I truly have no control, truly. And it was the weirdest weirdest thing for my entire story that I felt, where I felt like I got hit in the stomach and I felt like I came to. I felt like I just arrived back in my body that I hadn't been in for a year. And I swear to you, I looked around, the pipe in my hand and all the paraphernalia, and I looked around, and it was like I woke up from a coma, or I just came back from amnesia, and I was like so confused. I was like, wait, what? What? And then I realized, like, oh my God, I've been dealing this whole time. It was so unusual. I somehow came back to myself. I don't know. The shattering of the disillusionment brought me back to myself. And there's this story: when I was 3 or 4, I was left behind at the house that we were moving into another house. And I was left behind at this one house. The other house was like almost a mile away, but I'm still in Spider-Man underwear. And somehow I figured out how to get home to the new house after they left me by accident. But the part that marked my life was coming around the corner and realizing none of them noticed I was gone. And I had been gone walking there for like the last hour. And so that shattered my 4-year-old brain, made me needy, made me a fear of abandonment. The whole thing goes on. But it was almost as if when I came back to myself, there was some reconciliation between the two. Because talking about helping yourself, when when I realized, oh my God, what the fuck am I doing? I just started sobbing so hard. Like I was like convulsing. I dragged myself to the bathroom. I pulled myself up. I looked myself in the mirror, and I saw the 4-year-old. I saw the 13-year-old. I saw them. I saw them, and knowing them, I was like, I have to do something for them. I didn't have enough in me to do something for me at that age, but for them, that 4-year-old is innocent. I can do something for him. That 13-year-old that was molested, I can do something for him. I can do this for them. I can do this. And so it was almost like a mantra. I was like, I got to do something. I got to do something. I got to do something. And then I remember falling down the stairs down to my running mate, the girl that I was living with in the abandoned apartment. She took one look at me and just started sobbing. She could just see it, and she held me. We held each other, and we knew it. We were in this space, and the window was opening, and we had to jump through. And we were like, "What do we do?" Because we knew it was going to shut soon, and we were going to be called back by the drugs. And so we pulled out the yellow pages and just called any random rehab, but there was like 100. You were like, oh my God, what do we do? We got one, and they were like, there'll be a bed available tonight. Can you make it? And we're like, sure. And then that's when she called her parents. And then I realized I wasn't going to make it. So that's when I called my parents. But to your point, it was that revelation of, I can't save myself, but I can save that 4-year-old. That gets me moving, and it makes me want to cry. But I can save that 13-year-old. I can do that. That for whatever that he's innocent. I can do that. I'm fucked up. I'm not enough. I'm bad. I made some wrong decisions, but this 4-year-old doesn't deserve this. So I'm going to help him. And that's what got me eventually, obviously, to call my mother, to your point. So it is an ask for help, but it is also that empowerment of myself, of yourself in that way. That's what works for me at that time. I mean, eventually it's going to be whatever works for whoever and whatever it is for their story. But that's what hit me.
Well, what had happened was you hit rock
Exactly.
bottom.
You're
That
telling me.
that
I
was
thought I hit
your
rock bottom like 10 times.
well, that time it was bottom. So that's
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you will know when you have had enough. I say that as whether it's with addiction, a toxic relationship, whatever, you will know that day when you're done.
Yeah. And fortunately enough, that was because I got sober from that point on. So there was no relapsing for years. There was no back and forth testing it out. It was like, nope. That was the bottom floor. And and 20 years later, that was the bottom floor. I have that superpower of, no matter how bad days are out here, I can always look back on that still 20 years later and be like, I'm good today. I'm good. I'm good.
I get
I
that.
better be good.
All right. I mean, look at how much you've accomplished now, though. Like you can't live there. You can look and reflect on it because that is who made you who you are now. but
Yeah.
you are not that person anymore. You have come so far.
Past stuff, yes, yes, I should just simply say, yes, I am not that person. We're always doing the work. It just gets to a deeper layer. I've healed the relationship with my mother, my current husband, tiny things still get triggered from the past. I cried so many times writing this book. So there's always healing to be done, but there's a lot of thresholds I've crossed coming from to the point where I don't even, when I tell people the story like I just did, I'm like, it's a story. It's like, who is that guy? What? I could
Right.
never imagine doing any of that now. Never. Never. But I do have the belief though that if I did drink, I would be curious about, yeah, let's try a little cocaine. And then from the cocaine, I'd probably be like, I
So
wonder if I
good.
could try
Yeah.
meth. Exactly. No, it would be, but I'm not, I am a different person, but I'm also not naive to the fact that, I hardwired those grooves. And just because I haven't turned them on in 20 years does not mean they can still be turned, they can still be turned on is what so, there ain't, I ain't confused over here. Anyway,
I mean, it's a lifelong journey. You'll never be healed 100%. It doesn't exist. So
exactly. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
just got to give yourself grace on the bad days and keep working through it. But I think you're
Yeah.
doing amazing work. So if that means anything.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let's hope other readers of the book, feel the same way. I'm sure.
Yeah.
So,
When do you think it's going to come out?
we're still working on that date. So I will be able to update you as soon as I know, but for sure within the next year. I mean, it'd be great to, circle back and be like, hey, remember that thing I was talking about? Well, there's an expanded version of that. Here you go. They can follow me on Instagram, and I'm already starting to do previews of it as well. I don't know if you have like a thing where you list the info or whatever.
Of course. I will put the
I,
links in the show notes.
that thing, of course. I
That,
didn't want to
that.
like impose.
No,
Uh,
please. I do it for all my guests. So yeah, I
okay.
mean, I want people to be able to connect and people are going to identify with this story. Maybe not all parts, but it's very easily identifiable. Right? Chance, did you go to the Encino Detox Center?
No, the Encino, like out here in LA.
Yeah, I just had Andrew on my podcast.
Oh no! So my first year of recovery was in Northern Virginia, Washington D.C., and I went to this rehab called the Harrison House. It was a rehab for professionals. And I was like, oh, okay. I felt like that would be more normal people because I thought I was so normal. Again, with the I can go to rehab thing. And that's where I was with like, the Chardonnay moms and I don't want to call him a douchebag, but the guy was a total douchebag cokehead, like total cliche. The rehab was his own story, but we've read a lot of memoirs about rehab, but we had some characters. Oh, actually, there was this blind woman who had a problem with drinking, and she would push a button that would tell her the time. This is before, so 2000. It was before phones, really. I mean, we had phones, but not like we do now. So you would hear during the group sessions and the talks just this loud bing. The time is now 1:11, and like she would click it 5 minutes later. Like she didn't give a shit. She was just like, this is boring. She would always be checking the time. Anyway, I don't know why I'm thinking about her. I just thought that was funny.
It's funny.
Yeah.
I was just
Yeah.
curious. So it was like, oh, yeah.
Maybe I've run into him and by, being around the rooms and stuff, but my recovery journey started where it ended and where my using ended. And so I've come out to LA uh, with a clean slate. I don't live in a city where I can point to and be like, oh, I did this there and I did that there, which is very helpful. But when I go to DC, I'm like, oh boy, oh boy.
Yeah, I get that. Stay away.
Well, the main club at that time is now gone. The Washington National Stadium is on top of it.
Oh, well, then, yeah, that might make it a little harder.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Is there
Anyway,
anything else you wanted to add?
um, I mean, I covered so much. I'm probably gonna have like a vulnerable hangover here in the next day and being like, what did I just tell these people in the world? They're gonna judge me. But no, that's not what's gonna happen. But I'm gonna feel it. Now, the only other thing, again, is just when I do have the book release date, I'd love to let you share that with you, and you can do with that what you will.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah.
or, or if people listen to this and they have follow-up questions, we can save those and I can pop back on when we have the book release date and I can go into some of those questions as well.
Q&A, I like it.
Q&A. Put those Q's in the comment section. Eh.
Visually go.
No, what's the red? Oh, ask me anything. The Reddit. Ask me anything. Yeah, that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't do any of that shit.
No, no, I never have. But I mean, this is like, put something in the comments. Ask me anything, and then I'll come back
Right.
on.
Yeah,
We'll
no,
do
I'm
anything.
down for that. Absolutely.
Great. Good. Awesome.
All
Yeah.
right. Cool. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me and getting that out. Like we've been here for a bit. I hope the listeners are still hanging on. I'm sure they
Oh,
are.
they are. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, good.
All right.